Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Friends, welcome back to Ageless Athlete Podcast. This is your host, Kush Khandelwal. This is Thanksgiving week in the US. I hope all of you who celebrate the holiday or celebrate this time of the year are taking the opportunity to connect with people you love, to disconnect, to enjoy a bit of respite from a long year. I'm sure that everybody has had at work and at other projects. Today, I am not in my usual home base of San Francisco. I am actually in Bishop, California, on the eastern side of the Sierras. This place is world renowned for some of the best outdoor sports. I primarily come here for rock climbing, bouldering, and sport climbing, but it is also a destination for winter sports. Mammoth around here is amazing for skiing and also great hiking and fishing, etc. in the summer. It really is a jewel in the west coast of the US. I know that there are some of you who are in this area, so hello to you all. And funny, but it has been raining nonstop the last couple of days. I've spent some Thanksgiving breaks here in the past, and I've had gorgeous climbing weather, but this time it's a little bit different. Still, it is beautiful, and I love this part of the country, and I'm glad that I'm still able to connect with you. Today, I thought we would jog back in time and listen to this episode that I recorded earlier on in this podcast, and I promise this one will leave you riveted. It will challenge your perspective on what it means to be an elite athlete and leave you feeling so inspired. What drives someone to achieve the seemingly impossible? 99% of us will never climb El Capitan in Yosemite. Meet Wayne Willoughby, an adaptive rock climber who defied incredible odds and has climbed El Capitan in Yosemite not once or twice, but a mind-boggling 26 times. From battling polio and disabilities since infancy to suffering terrible injuries, Wayne overcame obstacle after obstacle. He also became the first adaptive climber to reach the summits of famous grueling climbs like El Cap and The Diamond in under 24 hours. In this wondrous conversation, and with his infectious yet humble demeanor, Wayne opens up about how he developed the grit, creative problem solving, and deep gratitude for life's simple gifts that empower him to defy limitations. His stoked for the outdoors and sheer refusal to be held back, despite the punishing toll on his body, is straight up inspiring. Whether you're a crusty trad dad or just someone looking for an awesome story of perseverance to get pumped on, buckle up. This convo with the real-life superhero still defying the odds well into his 70s is going to blow your mind. And if you like the show, leave a review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts now. I mean it. pause, do it now, and then come back over here. It helps others find the show. I thank you from the bottom of my ageless heart.
I had a ham sandwich for breakfast sitting at my computer desk here at the home that I share with my wife and our little kitty, Kaya, in Portland, Oregon. Beautiful Portland. Love this place so much.
You sent me some lovely pictures from a hike yesterday. Where were you, Wayne? And why is even going on a hike in your beautiful backyard challenging for you?
Well, I have to wear braces as a result of both paralytic polio when I was 9 months old, post-polio syndrome, which I started dealing with when I was 9 years old, unbeknownst to me until I diagnosed myself with it when I was in my 30s. And I've also had a lot of other injuries. Sadly, I have been hit by cars on my motorcycles and bicycle. I've been assaulted many, many, many times, including just 2 years ago, which have led to really, really, really major, major injuries. And then I've had lots of surgeries related to the polio going back to, I had 2 major surgeries before I was 2, which I had to then learn how to walk using a big, what's called a CAFO, a big metal leg brace on my right leg, and a set of parallel bars, throwing my right leg in front of me and holding myself up with the parallel bars. So that was my first time learning how to walk again post contracting paralytic polio. I walked for 3 or 4 days when I was 9 months old. I was pretty precocious and was able to walk for a few days before I contracted paralytic polio. But then I didn't walk again until I was 2 in the manner that I just described. And then I've had all these other times where I've had major surgeries, learn how to walk again, major injuries, learn how to walk again, trying to continue to be as close to the best that I can be with the limitations that have been imposed upon me. And so that is why it's just such an incredible blessing to be able to walk again. And it's timely. It's very timely, this question, because it's just been in the last 3 weeks that since the injuries from June of 2022, after those injuries, I could only walk assisted with a pair of hiking poles or one hiking pole, like say in the house, but anytime I would go out. And I've just started to be able to walk again without a hiking pole, just a few steps here and there. And I did take a fall and I got a little too ambitious. So now I'm starting to appreciate walking anew in ways that I wouldn't have had I not been through that. Now, there's no way. I'm glad that I had to endure what I did. But at the same time, it helps me to keep a perspective of gratitude for what I do have, rather than taking for granted what I have or being upset because I don't have more. Instead, now I'm like, oh, if I could only get back to where I was before those injuries, life would be pretty darn good. So it's really all a matter of perspective. And for me, it's really a matter of trying to steel myself, make it through each day the best day that I can, keep as much positive energy in my heart as I can, and try to make good things come from all of this in terms of, I'm also a painter, an oil painter, and I really find myself being challenged just to be able to paint when I have these major injuries. So then when I get to the point where I'm recovering a bit and I can actually paint again, then I appreciate it all the more. And maybe before those injuries, I was like, oh, why do I have to wear this wrist brace just to be able to paint? This kind of sucks. It gets in the way. And now it's like, wow, what a blessing that I'm able to paint. So it's really how you frame it. It's really how you see it. And that is a beautiful thing.
Thank you, Wayne. Remarkable. And there's so many questions that spring to mind. But just for edification, would you mind just talking just a little bit on what does how has post polio and subsequent trauma, how does that physically impact you, which makes doing everyday small things, including other things such as painting, walking, and all the other incredible things, what are fundamentally your limitations?
Well, I have to prioritize my time and my energy because I don't have an abundant, amount that I can just utilize without, thinking about, oh, what are the obligations that I have? Like, I can only paint for so long. I can only train so hard. I can only, I want to try to be the best that I can be, but I also want to be the best to myself that I can be. And as I'm aging, and I am 71 now, I think a lot about longevity, and my wife is a lot younger than me. Most of my friends are younger than her, even a lot of them, in fact. Um, and I don't mean to sound that I do have friends my age and even older. I'm not trying to say that I am an ageist type of person. That wasn't what I was trying to imply. I was just saying that I have a lot of motivation and a lot of reason to want to be here as long as I can be, functioning at as high of a level as I can be. And I think that's true of all of us. And if you look at America today, 43.7% of Americans are obese. So this concept is lost on a lot of people. And sadly, those people are all going to pay the price. You start becoming obese and you start having, I don't need to educate your audience on this topic. I'm sure they know it's, you're going to become pre-diabetic and you'll eventually become diabetic. You're going to have heart problems. You're going to have back problems. You're going to have other joint problems from, try carrying around. I mean, depending on how much over their ideal weight people are, just think what it would do to you if you carried let's say a 50-pound backpack around with you all day long. At the end of the day, you would be wiped out. Now try doing that every day with all this fat around your internal organs. Anyway, I don't mean to go too.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us take everyday health for granted. You know that adage, youth is wasted on the young, and there is maybe a parallel. Good health is wasted on the healthy. But coming back to you, so what I gleaned from that is you have limited supplies of vitality, and you have to be careful how you ration that. But outside of that, I believe you also have difficulty using all your limbs. I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24/7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode.
Oh yeah, no, I wear a ankle support on my left foot, an AFO, which is short for an acronym for assistive foot orthotic. Say that 10 times fast. I wear a cage type brace on my left knee, I wear a wrap brace on my right leg, and I wear wrist braces on both wrists, and also use elbow supports, tendonitis type, wraps around my forearms when I'm training. And I feel pretty lucky that, I'm able to do all of the things I'm able to do by using those. I also walk with hiking poles, as I alluded to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I had discovered those when I was like in grade school, how much easier my life would have been, because crutches just ruin your elbows, your shoulders. Canes are so hard on your wrists. But hiking poles, and especially if you're using the ones, the modern hiking poles that have the grips below the handle, I'm constantly, grabbing that, changing my grip. And then I have all these issues with my wrists and arthritis in my wrists. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really important for me to be able to have a solid base, which is not me just standing on my feet, but me standing on my feet and having those poles. And I really feel so blessed to have figured all of this out and to be able to do the things that I'm doing. And you were asking me about my hike and why my hikes mean so much to me. And it's because there's been times when I haven't been able to be at as high of a level, when I really believe that if you can work through injuries and issues and maintain some level of fitness without harming yourself further, that is really the way to go, because it's so hard to get back in shape at any age. And especially as you start getting up above, into your 50s, 60s, 70s. But with that said, I also think that there are so many people now who are doing the types of things that I'm doing, following the protocols I'm following, eating a relatively healthy diet, eating smaller portions, always trying to maintain their fitness level to the degree that they're able to, meditating, thinking positive thoughts, surrounding yourself with positive people, which is huge, which I've learned again and again and again how important that is. Those strategies will allow you, as you age, to age much healthier way and give you the potential to do so much more as you age.
Wayne, let me ask you about some of your early climbing days. And as we get into that, what I am intrigued and fascinated by is growing up in the 60s, 70s of the last century. I think just being differently abled must have been challenging enough. Just measuring up and doing everyday things would have been hard enough. What motivated you? What pushed you into embracing rock climbing? Something that is difficult and niche even today for able-bodied people. You were out there pushing the frontiers, learning how to climb, being differently abled. What gave rise to that passion?
Well, I've always been drawn to adventure sports, even though I was blessed to be able to live in Hawaii when I was a kid for a few years and had some pretty major surgeries done during that time, but still tried to surf to the degree that I was able to. As I look back on it now, I realize I should have been kneeboarding or even, belly boarding. But what did I know? I was a kid. Anyway, but I did get to surf a bit. I did have some great rides. I did have some great times with friends. Unfortunately, when I was 19, when I was 12, one of the surgeries I had in Hawaii, they took out my right leg was 3 inches shorter than my left leg because of the paralytic polio. And they took out the growth centers, the doctors at a military hospital in Hawaii took out the growth centers in my left knee, thinking my legs would grow even, but instead my right leg ended up growing 2.25 inches longer. So when I was 19, they took out 2.25 inches of femur from my right leg and an 18-inch long rod through my hip for a year and a half. I was 10 years into the post-polio syndrome. Unbeknownst to me, I had no idea what it was at that time. And that certainly didn't make the post-polio syndrome any better, certainly didn't make my physical circumstances any better. But it did teach me that I was going to have to work really hard again to get back to where I was before that event. And that led me, I had been an age group swimmer as well as had done the surfing. So I was in the water a lot. That led me to get back into a pool and start swimming again. And that led me to join the swim team in college and start playing water polo. And I was pretty fit and I knew guys that were climbers. And I was like, I'd love to try this. And I started out as a boulderer, which is ironic because these days bouldering is so popular and there's lots of people who are purely boulderers. That's all they do.
So hang on, you understand this. So you had post polio and you had these other issues going on, and you were bouldering in an era before bouldering pads were invented. It sounds like you were comfortable taking risks.
Try not to fall.
How supportive was your family, your friends, your community? And the reason I ask is I'm aware that sometimes when you have differently able kids born into families who are not accustomed to that, they can be overly protective of those kids and keep them from maybe flourishing into things. But here you're surfing, you are in swim teams, you're out there riding motorcycles. So how did your parents deal with that? How did your communities support that?
Well, I was really lucky that I had my mother had been a ballerina in England, and my father, Mike, I told you a little bit about some of my experience when I was 19. When my dad was 19, he was a side gunner in a B-17 during World War II in the 8th Air Force, which took the highest casualty and injury rate of any branch of the American armed forces during World War II. Extraordinary people. And so there was a side of, like they were happy for me. I think my dad, it wasn't like he was like, yeah, go climb El Cap. At the same time, he wasn't like, you can't do that, and so I think that I was really, really, really lucky to have friends who said, one of my early climbing friends who really believed in me was John Backer. And when I would talk to John because I had wanted to climb, even though I was mainly bouldering, I was doing okay. I knew that with my athletic background, with my drive, and I really wanted to climb El Cap. I had seen the first ascent of El Capitan when I was 5 years old. Those guys were up there for a long time. We lived not terribly far from Yosemite. There was, things in the news and the media about it, and we went up, and I can remember standing in El Cap Meadow as a little kid with this metal leg brace on and just thinking, man, these guys are the shit. This is it. Come on. And I always carried that memory with me. And so when I did start climbing, my big goal right away, as audacious as it may have sounded, was to climb El Cap. And I found out about another adaptive climber who had also had polio, Roger Breedlove. We've actually become friends now. And he had a lesser degree of disability than I did, but he was affected by polio and still hasn't been affected by the post-polio syndrome, luckily for him. So when I found out about him, Jim Bridwell was the first one who told me about Roger Breedlove. And, it was like, all right, John Backer thinks I can climb El Cap. Jim Bridwell thinks I can climb El Cap. Maybe I can do it. And then I had more injuries and I had more setbacks, but eventually I did. And I had more injuries and more setbacks, but eventually I got past those and kept going. And I'm in a place now where I am taking time off to recover from major injuries, but I still have the goal of getting back up there and doing more climbing. And I'm really incredibly blessed to have many, many, many partners who are also great friends who are highly interested in getting up there with me again, which is pretty extraordinary for somebody who's 71 with or without my medical history.
It is so badass. Can you describe to us what is climbing El Cap for you? And just for everybody's reference, also, what is the difference in a normal person climbing El Cap versus you climbing El Cap? You have climbed El Cap a record number of times.
Well, let's say for an adaptive climber.
Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing. It's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this.
Accepted, accepted. What I'm getting to is most climbers out there, 99 point X percent of all climbers, regular or different, they will never climb El Cap. Most of us will never climb El Cap. Not only have you climbed El Cap, you have climbed El Cap and also other walls many, many times. Would love to hear in your words, what is the experience of climbing El Cap? What does it involve? How is it like there? How is it like being up on the wall and accomplishing that kind of goal?
For me, my life has been broken up into all these different chapters of after these injuries, after this car hit me, after this person assaulted me. And so there's different layers. Now, when I climbed El Cap the first time, I hadn't had these major injuries in 91 that really, like I couldn't even walk for a long time after that. I was able to do a lot more. And then as time went on, I had various different things. So it's really all been different through the years. And I actually had a pretty good run up until I had some pretty serious injuries in 2017, where I was climbing quite a bit and doing quite a few walls, and was at a point where maybe I was starting to get a little blasé about it and taking it for granted a little bit. Of a short period of time, I set a record on El Cap with my friends Hans Florine and Brian McRae on the route Bad Seed for my first one-day ascent of El Cap. And that was extraordinary. And then after that, I went through this, went through that, and got to a point where we set a record on a route in Zion, and then had more injuries. And even after those injuries, set a record, did the first one-day ascent of the Aid route on a route in Squamish on the Chief. And that was extraordinary to be able to do that.
I was reading a little bit about your ascent with Hans and Brian. I actually am familiar with Brian McRae. I think that he also goes by Flying Brian, I think. I used to climb at the New River Gorge where Brian left a legacy behind. I remember reading, Wayne, that your climbing style was so different than everybody else's because you could not use your entire body the same way. So in essence, you were doing, is that true? You were doing thousands of pull-ups.
Yeah.
How is that like? What do you have to do to get up on a wall? What's the routine like? How do you gear up? How do you start climbing? How do you exchange places in all of those 30 odd pitches to get to the top of that monolith?
Well, I wear a sit harness as well as a chest harness. I use skateboard elbow knee pads as well as, knee pads on my elbows and my knees. And I use a speed stirrup that Hans actually designed, that Yates makes. And it's just it's like a as the name implies, a stirrup that goes around your foot with a little adjustment on it, and you clip that to your system. When you're jug, I have a chest harness, so I have my bottom jug between my sit harness and my chest harness. I'm connected from my sit harness to my jug. My chest harness and my sit harness, I have a jug in between, and then I have my top jug connected to the speed stirrup and connected to my bottom harness. So when I throw the top jug up and step up with the speed harness, then a lot of times I have to pull the rope underneath me through the bottom Jumar. And I also use my hands and my feet a lot on the wall. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm on the Chief, for instance, there's lots of places where I'm actually free climbing and just pulling my jugs up. And I can remember on one route I did on the Chief not that many years ago that I did a whole pitch. I free climbed the whole pitch and had to pull my jugs up as I was free climbing, just for the heck of it, just because I could do it, because it was easy free climbing. And I do mantles, and I do, I'm actually doing a lot more than just Jumaring. And then when I'm on really steep routes, like on the southeast face where Bad Seed is, which is the route you were talking about that I did with Hans and Brian, and that was the first 1 day adaptive El Cap ascent. And before I did that, I didn't even know how my body would react. I had tried cleaning. I did Lurking Fear in 94, was coming back from some major injuries. I had climbed the Diamond earlier that year and was carried in. And that's a big story in that I worked and got myself strong enough and used my poles to actually hike in and did 3 ascents of the Diamond in a row many years later. But on this ascent of Lurking Fear that I did in 94, I tried to clean. Well, I didn't clean the 2 traverses because the pitches, it would just take me too long to clean them. They're traversing pitches. But I cleaned all the other pitches easily. It wasn't even a problem for me until I got to the top. And then I realized I had been overtaxing my right leg to the point where it didn't even move when I got to the top. And the next day I started getting a little bit back and a little bit, but it took a long time. And then I realized, okay, I can't really be carrying a rack and taxing this leg to that degree. After that, I started doing all my El Cap ascents, pretty much just my partner's cleaning. I would clean, if there was some gear that it would be helpful for me to clean and make it easier for the second or whatever, I would do things like that. But a lot of times it would make it harder if I would, so I wouldn't. Anyway, so that was hard for me because I wanted to do more. At one point I wanted to get back into leading, but at the same time, it's like anytime you are, especially with aid climbing, leading, even a small fall onto your harness can really screw up your back. So I decided leading is probably not in my best interests. I'm trying to just be able to walk, and then falling, landing on my legs, that's not going to, so it was really hard for me to say, all right, I'm going to be limited to just doing this. But at the same time, doing it in a day was a whole nother thing. So then once I started doing 1 day ascents, it was like, okay, all I'm doing is Jumaring? Yeah. But it's still hard for anyone, and for me especially. And then as, like I was saying about Bad Seed, I didn't know how I would react. I didn't know how I would do. Well, when we got to that last pitch, we actually got off route and we were on a record pace. After we went off route and then got back on route, we were behind the record pace. So then we just had to really, really, really start busting it out. And when we got to the top, I had this giant Esprit 11 mil rope. Oh my God, the thing was it was like a steel cable. It weighed so much. And it was going to be most expedient to do the fastest time for them not to fix that rope and for me to clip it to my harness and jug the last pitch with that rope clipped to my harness and me just jugging the line that was already going to the top. And, that was like, whoa, I wouldn't have known that I could have found that within myself to do that had I not been there
Wow.
in that position. And we broke the record by 45 minutes.
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together: training, aging, mindset, and awe. You will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
Now, hang on. So, is this the record for normal bodied people, or is this the record for?
No, this was the record.
Oh, wow.
No, this was the No, and that's why it was such a big thing for me, because it was the record for able climbers, and it was also the first one-day ascent of El Cap by any climber. And then that opened up the door to me to start doing other one-day ascents. When I did the nose in a day with Hans, I didn't really know how my body would react. And then I had, if it wasn't going to be difficult enough already, I had some Jumars given to me by a sponsor and didn't use my usual follow my proper protocol that I normally would follow and use the Jumars I usually use. One of those, and I only brought one of them. I brought the top Jumar, and it started failing on me around sickle, like 4 pitches up, and started sliding down the rope. And progressively, as we got higher and higher on the route, it would slide down and slide down and slide down. So that made it way harder. But we were on about a 13 and a half hour pace, but we still did it in, I think it was 22, 21, I forget. It was, well under 24, not, super far under. But Hans wasn't too happy about that because we were on such a good pace. But he was a trooper, and that was incredible. I didn't know how my body would react without having a Jumar sliding, but I was able to, so it's like it's changed for me because of my improving my situation, and then my situation being worse off because of this, because of that. So it's really never been static. It's never been like a consistent thing for a protracted period of time. And so that's really made my whole climbing career very interesting. Maybe makes what I have accomplished that much more powerful when I really ruminate on it and really think about it and really reflect on it.
It sounds so extraordinary because you have had to learn how to climb with all kinds of, let's say, body evolutionary dynamics. You have had a series of changing conditions with which you have been able to somehow cope and retrain yourself how to climb. Yeah, which makes it really remarkable because none of us most of us don't have to, we are dealing with, let's say, normal day to day, or let's say aging related, or simple things. Like I am dealing with some of that myself as I get older. There's some things I can do quite as easily, but it's not that I have had to train myself to use my body in different ways over a 20-year climbing career. So I think you've kind of been on your own, Wayne, in learning how to adapt and keep pushing yourself and keep honestly pushing the boundaries of climbing.
Well, I definitely didn't have a template to follow, but at the same time, I did know that the other things that I had done in the past, age group swimming, surfing, water polo, riding motorcycles, riding bicycle, hiking, on and on. And I've done a lot of hiking over the years. I've hiked to the top of Half Dome a couple of times, which is no big deal for the average person, but for me, and once I did it from my house, from my house to the top of Half Dome and back down. That was a pretty big, the other time we had This is before you couldn't stay on top of Half Dome, like I think it was 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And we slept the night on top. That was pretty extraordinary, but I did it, like all in a push to the top. And that's a long way for somebody who has a leg like mine. But so all of those things all prepared me for the things that came after that. And all of those things that came after that prepared me for where I am now. So it's not like I ever wanted to have greater limitations imposed, but I didn't have a choice once those events transpired. And so it was all about how can I make the best of this? How can I get to be my best? But I think a really important thing to bring up also is without the motivation to climb, without the desire to try to make good things come from all of this, without the knowledge, knowing that some people can actually and have actually been inspired by some of my actions, gives me a huge amount of motivation to do that extra 30 pull-ups that day, to do 180 pull-ups instead of 150. Because when I do get back up on El Cap, I am going to be older. I do have a little bit more significant degree of disability now, and I'm going to need to be the best that I can possibly be. Now, would I be doing 180 pull-ups if I wasn't thinking in that way? Hell no. There's no way. And so that is a lesson that maybe somebody else can learn that's taken me a long time to learn through all of these major injuries and whatnot. But I think you get my point.
I think you nailed it. I think it's the power of goal setting, which is shared across humanity. You may not want to go out and either do those pull ups or walk the extra mile or burn the midnight oil studying if you did not have a goal to aspire to. So I think you said it pretty clearly that you didn't want these challenges. These challenges came to you and you reacted to them because that's the only way you were going to be able to meet some of these goals you had with life, with climbing, with everything else that came your way. And I guess what I'm learning is, there were two ways to go about it, which is either you go and, and grab the proverbial bull by the horns and you do those countless pull-ups, or you don't follow your goals. And I think the second is not an option. One sets goals and one wants to go after them, and you set a pretty transformational example of what it takes, and just I think the power of aiming high, literally and figuratively. And did you have a community, Wayne, of other differently able climbers with which? And the reason I ask is at a much smaller scale. So, for example, I'm an Indian immigrant, and I started climbing in the U.S. I sometimes do miss having, let's say, other brown humans climbing me, because I started climbing here and I was like this lone brown guy. And
at that time, it was a very white-dominated sport. It was almost all white guys, and now it's changing. There's as many women at the crags as there are men some days.
Exactly. And what I'm saying is I got only love and support from everybody else. But once in a while, I would wonder how would it be to be climbing with other people of my ethnicity or background. But I feel like that in your case, that this is my naive thinking. Did you have a community of differently able climbers that you climbed with back then or even today who understood the specificity of your challenges, your experience?
No, none. No, I like I told you about Roger Breedlove. I knew of his story a little bit. He actually was a guide in Yosemite. He led clients up Half Dome, I think at least 3 times, the regular route of Half Dome. He led every pitch on an ascent of the Salif in 75, I think it was. And he told me, he says, I always figured I had one El Cap ascent in me, and I was right. And he could have done many more, but Roger actually is a brilliant person and was very dedicated to his wife and saw the less than positive aspects of some people's choices of being really dedicated to climbing in the 70s, and kind of gave it up and put it off to the side and really focused on his career, and now has two daughters who are successful, wonderful, happy, well adjusted, has a wonderful relationship with his wife, has had a great life, is still involved with climbing online and has lots of friends who are climbers. But I don't think he's really got a strong desire to keep climbing. I don't know why I do, but I do. I still want to get up there. I am not at a place where I feel my body is ready to get back to it. But I know that it is, as I've, now that I'm in my 70s, it's all that more impressive. To me, it's like me just continuing on something that I've been doing for a really long time. I started climbing in 77,
Yeah.
which is a lot of years now.
Yeah.
And there's been blocks of time where I haven't been able to. But during all of that time, it's always been a consistent desire of mine to try to get back to it. And I mentioned my oil painting. I take a huge amount of inspiration from my climbs and pour it into my painting. And I realize that, and that motivates me to climb even more, because that power that I take from that, which infuses all these different aspects of my life, makes my painting better. And my painting is so important to me that even if it's on a subliminal level, even if it's not something I'm consciously thinking about on a regular basis, it's still there. Yeah, I mean, those are beautiful things. Those are wonderful things. And I don't remember the exact quote from William Blake, but he said something along the lines of, the only right way to complain is by expressing yourself in a creative manner.
There's some depth in that one. And yes, with your painting and your climbing, I have some side hobbies as well. And I feel that when, for example, I do something which is non-outdoorsy, I like to go salsa dance and do some other kinds of performing arts stuff. And the more I do of that, the more my hunger for the outdoors grows. And then when I'm outside, I come back to my, let's say, more urban passions, and they stay ignited because of somehow the this play between these two different worlds and how they help me find balance in my own life. Talking of finding balance, Wayne, you have been climbing for a long time and climbing at a very high commitment and intensity level. How have you supported yourself? What kind of career have you had that has allowed you to pursue this very high maintenance passion?
Well, unfortunately, the post polio syndrome has limited me to a great degree in terms of what I may have done otherwise. I have never been fortunate enough to have, I mean, there was a time when I thought I was going to have a career doing public speaking, but unfortunately, I had these major injuries which made travel really difficult and made the post polio syndrome worse. I thought that perhaps through making a film and having some of my art in it, it would expose my art to a greater audience, because it's so hard. The art world is so hard to break into it. You really need to be so dedicated, and I'm pretty limited in the number of paintings I can paint. And if you're going to get hooked up with the right agent and gallery and all of that, you really need to be really prolific and real. So all of these various different things that I am articulate. I believe I could have done well if I had the ability to travel without impacting my health so adversely, if I hadn't have had so many setbacks and so many injuries. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is that I have continued to follow the things that I felt were most important, and I have been able to do pretty well with that. I probably will never have, success with my art in the ways that success is, like, it's not necessarily how good your art is, or how much it touches people. It's how much money you can make from it, or how you can how you can sell whatever it is. And that's capitalism, and that's how it works. And I understand that. But I've been really lucky to have been able to have people who really believed in me. So I was able to do my climbs with friends who weren't expecting great compensation.
Mhm.
And if I gave them one of my paintings, they were thrilled with that.
Mhm.
Whereas someone else may have had to hire a guide or two
Mm.
guides, find a way to have porters. So I've really done all of my adventures really on the cheap, you know, like I have done it in ways that were sustainable for me for my particular situation.
Makes a lot of sense. You were able to gift unique items, if I may, to people, labors of love. And in return, people like Hans and others were able to share a part of their craft, their time, and their labor of love with you. So, to me, this is also part of the beauty of the climbing community, or at least how it used to be. And I think still is in many respects, where people will recognize a shared passion and kindred spirits and want to do things together because there is just that shared love for the sport. Moving on, before we close this chapter out, any goals you have with climbing that you are still fired up about? Specifically, you already have done El Cap, I think, over 20 times. Are you trying to tick all the major routes on El Cap? Are there any other ones which burn your fire?
No, I'm basically at a point now where I probably am going to wrap El Cap the next time I do it, rather than doing the big hike down from the top. And it's very likely that I will end up doing a route on the far west face, and that way I can do a route over there on the far left side on the west face, and then wrap down, and I have a route chosen to wrap down that's pretty direct. And that way I won't have to that'll make it so much easier. Once I top out, I won't have to do the long
Okay.
hike and come around. And then it not only will be easier for me, it hypothetically should make it easier for my partners, because all we're doing, I can't actually rappel. I have to be lowered. And I have a pretty good system that I use where I clip a sling to my sit harness, wrap it around my line I'm being lowered on. Well, there's already a line. The first person has gone down, so there's a line going to the anchor. So I just put the sling around that, clip it to my harness, and then the sling directs me straight down to the anchor. I just have to be lowered.
Got it.
And then I use my hand on the wall. And so I pretty much am not necessarily thinking in terms of the longest route, the hardest route. I'm just thinking of how can I stack? And then I also really want to do it in under 24 hours. And so that's kind of where I'm thinking, but I haven't said to myself, if I don't do it, then I will have failed my life. No, it's all predicated on how much improvement I can find physically, how good of health I can get myself back into. And I am improving all the time. And so that's something that's a really big thing for me, is trying to keep that balance going while I still achieve goals. And then there's lots of other routes on other formations that are out there. El Cap isn't my only thing that I have in my mind. I definitely would like to climb the Chief again. I may go back and do another route in the Black Canyon. Am I going to climb the Diamond again? No, definitely not.
That hike is brutal.
That's Oh, yeah. I mean, and I've done it 4 times, which is a lot. I only know of one other adaptive climber who has done the Diamond, Aaron Ralston,
Hmm.
who, the film that was made about his experience in the desert. And he did it with my friend Timmy O'Neill. And he said after that ascent, that was the hardest thing he had ever done in his life by the power of 10. climbing the diamond.
Sure.
And then the elevation too.
Absolutely. You mentioned Timmy, and I know Timmy as well. And I know Timmy is deeply involved with Paradox Sports, the organization that
Well, he and Mal were the ones who started it. Malcolm Bailey.
he started it. What I'm coming to is yourself as an adaptive athlete. Have you been able to inspire, guide, train other adaptive climbers or adaptive athletes, either through Paradox or outside? Because I'm sensing there are many people out there who would, adaptive or otherwise, who would benefit from your tutelage. But specifically, if there are people in that community who have had the benefit of learning from you.
I've been sharing knowledge with adaptive climbers and with people who are helping other adaptive climbers for many decades. And I actually am in the process of helping somebody right now who is working on a project. Yeah, it's something that's really meaningful to me, knowing that I still, even when one day I won't be able to climb anymore, I still will have knowledge that I can impart that can be helpful to someone else. But I think even bigger than that, or maybe it's not bigger than that, but I think another element that is very powerful in this whole equation is the fact that I am able to find the way, these ways in terms of having these injuries, but still coming back and doing this. And that example is something that, and then also the fact that, I was the first adaptive climber to climb the diamond. I was the first adaptive climber to climb the chief. I was the first adaptive climber, I believe, to do a route in Zion. And if I wasn't, with that route, we did it in like 10 and a half hours. So I did the first 1 day ascent there. I've done lots of 1 day ascents of routes that are very meaningful, knowing that it was the first time. Like, talking about it sometimes kind of takes some of the power away from it. But it's not easy for me just to make it through your average day. Like, I almost fall over and do fall over just in my kitchen trying to make dinner. But if I'm still able to accomplish these things that are seen as goals that, I'm not saying this well at all, but I will basically say that there's a quote from the Ojibwe that I like to remind myself of. And it goes, sometimes I go about pitying myself, and all of the time I am being carried by a great wind across the sky. And when I am in that place, carrying that gratitude with me, it enriches my life in so many different ways. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's something that also, I think, makes me want to continue on this path as long as I can, because it's just part of who I am at this point.
The quote is powerful, and being able to understand the quote, find meaning and applicability is what makes it real and profound. You have accomplished a lot. Any major sacrifices to have achieved this life?
Well, I think anyone who accomplishes anything that's outside the realm of what fits into the sort of the square peg goes in the square hole, the round peg. Anytime that you're getting outside of that, anytime you're doing something that's in the arts, you were talking about, you have an interest in, it sounded like music, perhaps?
Music and performing arts, dancing, etc.
So anytime you're involved in any discipline of any kind, and especially creative disciplines, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to be able to do that enough to actually become good at it, to actually become proficient at it enough to be involved with other people who are proficient at it. When I climbed Lurking Fear with Steve Schneider in 94, what made him want to go up there with me was the fact that I had climbed the Diamond earlier that year. And he was like, if you climb the Diamond, El Cap is going to be a party. And I climbed the diamond. The first time I climbed the diamond, we got hit by a major storm. We were up
Mm.
there in snow, sleet, hail, 110-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. I jumarred through a waterfall for hours and hours. I mean, it was epic. Truly, like, I'm not exaggerating. It was epic.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I had to be carried in and carried out. I mean, those guys, my friends who helped with all of that, Mike O'Donnell, Bill Witt, Pat O'Donnell helped organize the guys who carried. A lot of them took off when the storm hit. Pat helped to carry me. It was wild, the level of commitment. And it's the same thing with other disciplines. For you to have accomplished something worthwhile, it took a lot of sacrifices to accomplish that. But then that is part of the foundation that you build on that leads to what comes after that.
Certainly.
And yeah, it's, there's nothing that's worth doing that is easy. I think that probably says it, succinctly. All of those paragraphs that I just said, you can encapsulate it all in that one little statement.
It sure does. Any regrets, Wayne, to achieve this life?
Well, I regret having chosen to be around people that I maybe wouldn't have been around because I was trying to help someone in different times and have been seriously injured as a result of those instances. But at the same time, I did have an open heart. I was in those situations with an open heart. And just because someone took advantage of me having an open heart doesn't mean that I should close my heart off. But you can always look at life and go back, and hindsight's always 2020. But at the same time, by having that sort of mentality, then nothing's, you're always going to be saying, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that, this could have been so much better, instead of reveling in what you were able to accomplish and taking all of that energy and putting it into moving forward and making good things come from what you learn from all of because sometimes you have to fail to learn really valuable lessons. Some say, as a scientist, you may do 10,000 experiments that none of them go the way you want them to, but on the 10,001, boom, it's there, whatever it was. Oh, I put too much of this in or whatever. And that was, what made me realize I should have been doing this all along. You know what I'm saying?
I'm fortunate that I'm a little bit more mature now. I'm 45, that I can appreciate what you're saying. I think 10 years ago I would not have had the maturity to appreciate that, because I recognize that all these things that I've done and all my experiences, whatever label I might give them, make me the person I am and enable me to move forward with all the learnings and the lessons. Interestingly, I talked to this really high performing marathon runner a few days ago who's in his 50s, and he only started running a few years ago. So one of his obvious regrets can be, yes, if I had started running at 15 and not 45. But then he said he may not appreciate running as much. He may have lost the fire and quit. So I really feel that most things in life are exactly what you said. They shape us into who we are today. So thank you for helping me appreciate that even more.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. I certainly would like to think that there is still the possibility for me to come back for someone in my physical circumstances and my age, because I do need to acknowledge the fact, getting into your 70s is an accomplishment. I've outlived a lot of my contemporaries. I outlived a lot of people who were much younger than myself. And so that alone is an accomplishment. But I think that, basically the thinking that led me to try to accomplish things that I have accomplished in the past, in terms of not listening to the voice of some other individual who I mean, when I first started climbing and first started talking about El Cap, there were supporters and there were those who said, "Oh, you've done this, you've done that. I could totally see you having the drive and being somebody." And then there were others that were like, "Oh man, I've been climbing for this many years and da da da. I know I'm never going to be able to do it. What makes you think you'll be able to do it?"
Hmm.
So, had I listened, I was wise enough to listen to the former rather than the latter voices. And that was what allowed me to continue to believe that the goals that I have were achievable. And I think that's true of anyone, whether they're able, whether they're disabled. There's all kinds of disabilities. More and more people are talking about they deal with whatever it is. I could throw out so many different things. There's more people on medication than there's ever been.
Hmm.
I firmly believe a lot of those people don't need to be on medication, and especially people who are on things like, high blood pressure medication or people who are pre-diabetic because they've eaten themselves. It's not necessarily that they were born with whatever childhood diabetes or,
Hmm.
it's behavioral. It's if you exercise, if you eat a healthy diet, if you try to think good thoughts, if you meditate, if you surround yourself with good people. These seem like basic, easy things, but unfortunately, a lot of people, it just seems to escape them. They seem incapable of being able to do that. And we live in a society where more and more and more things just seem to be so out of balance. And there's just such a sense of, anyway, I don't mean to sound too cynical, but it's not necessarily just me who's, expressing that. And so that makes all of these other connections and all of these other, just going for a walk in the forest and being around some wildlife and nature, just the beauty of nature, the stars, the moon. I'm lucky enough to live near where on my hikes I get to look at Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens. I mean, these are glorious things that easily can be taken for granted, but that's kind of the point, is you want to be in a place where you don't take things for granted, where you do feel like much of each of your days is worth celebrating and creating events that, I mean, when I finish with this interview with you, I can't wait to work on this painting I've been working on.
Hmm.
And I felt that way before we started, but I feel even more that way now. And that's a beautiful thing.
110% with everything you said. Moving on, Wayne, in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Well, the last 5 years have been pretty interesting for me. 7 years ago, it'll be 7 years ago in April, should I say who it was that it happened with? There was a person who I was around, who I've been very kind to, who isn't the highest functioning person in the world. And I went to give them a hug. They were sitting in a little chair, and this person grabbed me around my neck and pulled themselves up and then fell back down, but didn't let go of my head and popped my neck out of place, my atlas completely out of place, and then everything popped out of place all the way to my right hip. Well, I had just broken a record on a route in Zion. This and that and the other. I was the fittest I'd been in years, the strongest, the most vital. My health was. Anyway, that sent me into a spiral of ill health and all of these problems. And I kept climbing in spite of the fact that my hip was completely out of place, and did 2 ascents of the Chief, did the first 1-day ascent of a route, did 2 ascents of El Cap, did Zodiac in 17 and a half hours. Luckily, I had really strong partners for that one, and actually even had to stop for an hour at one point because my body was in so much pain, and I just had to, And then after that, I had more injuries, and then after that, I had more injuries, and I brought myself back from that. my wife's father had a terminal illness, and her mother has issues and had to move to a care facility at the same time that her dad had this terminal illness. And we actually moved here to care for him and were able to keep him in home and give him good care. And unfortunately, at the end of that event, I was injured by someone else, assaulted and seriously injured. And this is something that goes on with people with disabilities quite frequently, sadly. And you don't really hear about it. And the numbers are vastly underrepresentative of actually what does transpire, because most of these events are never reported. But with all of that said, I know that I could have let all of that completely destroy me and completely, just make me give up and just say, okay, enough is enough. Like I can't, I'm only so strong. I can only put up with so. But no, I knew that if I kept on trying to find improvement, kept on trying to improve, that I would find improvement. I didn't know how much, but now I'm now getting to the point where, and I've had some more falls and more injuries, but I am getting to the point now where I'm starting to feel better, where I'm getting more vital, where doing things isn't as difficult as it was, where I can see myself actually climbing again and having a really good time doing it. And I've got all these great friends who believe in me and want to climb with me. And that alone is an extraordinary thing at any age for someone with my degree of disability, but especially somebody who's 71,
Yeah.
and that's a powerful thing. That's a beautiful thing. And not just because it's me who's in this body, but just talking about it and trying to see it from outside myself. Like, yeah, that's a pretty great thing. Like, yeah, so that makes me really look forward. I take the weekends off from training, but it really makes me look forward to Monday. Like, I'm excited on Monday. I'm going to get back to my pull-ups. I'm going to get back and do another wonderful hike. I'm going to see some of my friends out on the trail who I've been making, all these wonderful people who have all these great things going on in their life. A lot of them are creative people, a lot of them, but the thing that we all share is we all love nature. We all love being out there. And those things are easy to take for granted if you see it from the right way. It's miraculous. It's extraordinary. And so that's what I try to do on as many days as I can, is to have this sense of how blessed I am, how incredibly beautiful this world is and can be, in spite of all of the less than wonderful things that exist. But ever has it been so? When was there ever a time when, in ancient Rome, you could go and buy a disabled person as your own personal scapegoat? This isn't a new thing, people abusing people with disabilities. I just happen to be one of many, through the centuries of humanity. But am I going to let those events define me? No. And that's the difference in terms of your thinking and in terms of your attitude. And if I can share that with someone else, and that can help to allow them to learn those lessons I've had to go through so much to learn. Wow, how beautiful is that?
How blessed am I?
You said something, Wayne, that caught my ear. The ability to observe oneself from the outside. I started and have been able to keep up, for the most part, a meditation practice. And I am trying to develop that ability of being able to just dissociate myself and being able to observe and be more self-aware. When I heard you say that, it made me wonder if you are, let's say, religious, or you have a spiritual practice of your own that gives you this ability.
Well, I think that I do consciously try to set aside time to meditate each day. And I also see my hikes as a walking meditation. I see my painting as a form of meditation. And at my best, when I am really diving deeply into that pool of the color and the textures and the brush strokes and the designs and the patterns, and it all becomes something that lifts me up to a higher place than I would be if I wasn't following that discipline, if I wasn't. And then I've been doing this for decades and decades and decades,
Mm-hmm.
and I've learned so much about breath control when I'm holding the brush. I've learned so much about breath control when I'm climbing, when I'm hiking, shutting off the internal dialogue to the degree that I'm able, and being the observer and listening to my intuition too, which is a
Mm-hmm.
big part of the whole equation, not just being purely driven by my analytical thoughts. And feeling when I'm, for instance, when I'm sometime, I mean, I've been on hikes and scrambling, third classing, where it's like almost like I'm going to take a fall and I feel weightless somehow. And it's almost like invisible hands helping me or something. And I don't want to make too much out of it, but I've experienced it so many times. It's like, okay, I don't want to like say that was this or, defining it in certain terms, like, but just being open to the possibility or possibilities of there being so much more than what we know, and especially in our society today, like I was talking about, there's so much the superficial is celebrated,
Mm-hmm.
where not only is the superficial celebrated, but the artificial, all the people who are having all this plastic surgery and all these women in their 20s, not even waiting until their 30s, that are having, fillers and all, and it's just, it's antithetical to what I'm talking about, because you're so focused on, think that there are so many things that we can focus on that will bring so many blessings to us in so many ways, that you're limiting yourself by
Mm-hmm.
following, and I don't mean to, make too much out of all of that. I didn't really mean to go on too much about it, but I was just trying to kind of make that point. I could have easily said at different times, like, this is enough. Like if I hadn't have been trying to do whatever it was, this person wouldn't have wanted to try to stop me from doing it. But at the same time, maybe that gives more power to what I'm doing in a certain way, because what I'm doing must really, anyway, I don't mean to make too much out of any of it, but at the same time, the world is this incredibly out of balance. It's the Hopi, the Koyaanisqatsi, the prophecy, life out of life out of balance. We are in the midst of this time of life being incredibly out of balance. So how do you try to find a way to find balance, and especially when you're as out of balance in terms of my physical reality, making me need all of these device brace and poles just to be able to ambulate, yet not saying that's enough and saying I want to still be able to do this. And that's what we are all trying to do at our best, is trying to raise ourselves up to a level that's
Mm-hmm.
above where we are
Mm-hmm.
now. And then we have a new baseline, and then try to raise ourselves up above that. And you can only do it for so long,
Mm-hmm.
because we do live in bodies that have a shelf life,
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think that there are more possibilities for doing that as you age now than there has ever been, with medical advances, with more knowledge about nutrition, with, I could go on and on with it.
Absolutely. We've gone on for some time. Just a couple of final fun questions before we let you get back to your painting. What's been the best $100 you spent in recent memory?
Let's see. Hmm. What is the best $100 I've spent in recent
It
memory?
doesn't have to be that exact number, but
No. I'm trying to think. I bought a few things. We bought this house and have done a lot of work to it, and it's a little bit bigger than the space we had before. So I bought a few little cool things on Facebook Marketplace. I got
okay.
this little Thai Buddha that somebody, but I haven't really bought any climbing gear. I really haven't bought any paint. Those are the things that are kind of meaningful. Like, oh, I know. I gave a pair of my hiking poles that I had been using to somebody who I thought could use them, and did get a new pair of hiking poles. It's ironic. I've learned that I won't say any name brands, but the more expensive hiking poles are working less effectively for me than ones I'm finding that are more like in the $30, $27 range. They're actually larger in circumference, so they give you more support. They
Oh.
have a larger handle, these really wonderful core handles. Do your due diligence when you buy hiking poles, when you do a Google search, and you might find some really great ones that work really well. Oh, I know. I bought another pair of hiking poles from a young woman who has a disability, who is and I've been talking a little bit with this filmmaker who's working with her, and he's doing a film project and is filming all of her climbs. And she's been using crutches and a cane to get around. And when I heard that, I was like, dude, send me your address. So I bought a pair for her and just sent her a pair of those.
Feel free to share the name. I mean, we give them credit. This brand that's providing great value for money.
Oh, let's see. What is it? I have to go and get it. It's over here. Let me go and get the pole.
Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You can send it to me later. It's all good. It's all good.
Okay, you can find them easily enough if you do a Google search. Hiking poles
Under 30.
and it's amazing. They come with tips that are just as good as the expensive ones. They work really well, and they give me more stability. When I gave away the one pair I was talking about, when I had a few days of going back to I won't say the name of the company, the ones that were thinner and smaller
Mhm.
handles, I was struggling, and was stumbling more. And then when I got the new ones back that were more robust and sturdier, it was like, yeah, really made me appreciate them that much more.
I never did used to bring hiking poles on hikes or treks, but recently I did borrow somebody's poles on a trek in Peru, and I am converted. Hiking poles are great. If there was a giant billboard and you could write a message for humanity, what would it say?
It would probably be one of my paintings, because that was actually a big thing that I was motivated to do at one time, was do murals. But unfortunately, my physical reality limited my grand ideas were never able to. But yeah, I would be doing I actually have a friend who is a muralist who has offered to do one of my paintings as a mural, but it would be a matter of jumping through a lot of hoops and a lot of
Mhm.
effort and a lot of time. And lately my time has been, really limited, just trying to take care of recover from these major injuries, trying to create a new life for ourselves, trying to find, balance with all of the other things that are going on. But yeah, that would be really cool to see one of my paintings as a big billboard. That would be a wonderful message to share, because I think that paintings and images carry so much more power than the number of words you could put
Mhm.
on a billboard.
Mhm. It's true. You know what they say, a picture is worth so many more than just words, yes.
1,000 words. At the same time, I was reading the amount of time the average person spends in front of a painting in a museum, and it's abysmal. It's like, a really, really small time measurement.
I have a personal pet peeve with the way museums are designed. I think they seem to be designed to get you in and out as quickly as possible.
And it depends on the country you're in. If you're in England, if you're in London, the Tate, one of the best museums in the world, is free. American museums don't get the same kind of financial help from our government as some governments give to their, the cultural. But anyway, basically, yeah, I think that a lot of museums, that's how they survive, is by having big shows with highly regarded, big named artists. And that doesn't just draw the people who are normal patrons of the museum, it brings in people from the periphery,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how they generate more income and how they're able to sustain themselves. So I see that side of it, but I also really appreciate the museums who try to create an environment where you can go there and really be touched and moved and carry something with you that you didn't have before you went and saw whatever exhibition or paintings or combination of paintings.
Absolutely. And final question, what is one meal that you could eat every day?
Well, you're going to appreciate this. How about we have this? We're really blessed to have this incredible new Indian restaurant who has opened not far from us. And their chicken biryani, I just had some last night. Oh my God, it's to die for. All of these incredible spices and the aromas and the combination and the flavors and the textures.
I've been hearing wondrous things about the diversity and the quality of cuisine in Portland.
Portland has the best food scene in America. And part of it, again, is the powers that be. The city government is making it easy for people to have food carts. And they've just opened up a new section downtown to try to bring more people back downtown and to have more choices for the workers that are working downtown, because a lot of restaurants have closed. But it's really a blessing to have so many ethnic restaurants in particular. Oh, which Sri Lankan place did you go to? Like, there's like 5 of them or something. It's pretty extraordinary. It's pretty extraordinary, and it's not historically something that ever used to exist here, because the food choices here in the past were not so great generally, and so that makes it all the more powerful and makes us appreciate it all that much more.
Wow, all that food conversation is making me hungry. Wayne, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening. Holy moly, what a wildly inspirational dude Wayne Willoughby is. Despite all the brutal physical challenges he's faced since basically being a baby, his psyche and zest for the outdoors are just unreal. From clawing his way to becoming the first adaptive climber to crush hardcore routes like the nose on El Cap and the Diamond in a day, to finding creative ways to keep crushing after every new injury or setback, Wayne's accomplishments are straight up mind melting. And get this, he's still setting goals and training his ass off at 71 years young. Whether you are a die-hard climber or just someone who needs a boost to attack your own wildest ambitions, let Wayne's story light that fire. In his words, there's nothing worth doing that's easy. Time to get after it. If you haven't left a review for the Ageless Athlete podcast on your favorite app, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, please do it now. I really would appreciate it. Until next time, my good friends, stay adventurous, stay humble, stay ageless.
Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through prior episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.